Hello everybody, it is me, GamePenguin21, and today, Icon Era. Oh boy, the bastion of very, very strange and weird takes, and quite honestly, ones that just kind of make no sense sometimes. Today decided to release or not today, but about last week when Marathon and stuff was trying to make the rounds here, and people were talking about it needing to be free to play. Icon Era decided to throw their hat into the ring, and so we're going to read through a fair bit of the actual talking points, of which we have here. Now, the main actual body of the article, I'm just going to read through for the most part, and then we'll get into some of the comments there, so I might have to do some little bit of editing around that. The majority of this video is going to be reading the comment because the comment itself is a freaking essay, dude. And, oh boy, do we have a couple of things for you. But, of course, before we get into that, if you like what it is I do and want to show me any other way, shape, or form other than like and subscribe, which is always enough, link down to everything in the description below. But let's get started. So the Icon Era post that we are taking a look at today is called Free-to-Play Games. Free-to-Play has broken gamers' sense of value, which, I mean, I guess, but at the same time, it just is one of those things where, I don't know, just kind of seems stupid to even really talk about. So, very weird. That being said, let's get into the actual comment made by Voke here, who is apparently a content creator. Let's go. I'm making this thread today after seeing some of the discourse online of Marathon. I think you're supposed to do something. The usual talking points are thrown around. DOA, why isn't this free to play, or Concord 2? I think $40 price tag is very good sign because it shows that the game likely won't have what I call mobile game monetization, which has infested many multiplayer games today. It means at launch you're likely getting a pretty complete experience, not nickel and diming, just a battle pass if you choose to opt in. When the free-to-play game releases, you often see things like $20 to $80 skins, unlimited gambling mechanics through loot boxes, and unbearably long unlocks or grindy battle passes. If this game does indeed launch at $40 to $50, you'll be getting a much better experience out of it, at the very least during the initial launch phase when player engagement is at its peak. It's sad that the era of multiplayer games being so awesome, being constantly rewarded is being replaced with the nickel and dime model. As a game experience, I don't think quality and fun factor is worth trading for engagement numbers, especially when you see free-to-play games flop too. It's not an easy way to make your game a success. Now, I think that last bit there of free-to-play games flopping too, and it's not an easy way to make your games a success, is very much correct. Now, I'm not going to say that it's like the most correct thing there, but I agree, and it's mostly true, because free-to-play games can actually and do rely on several different aspects to it. But that's not including the games that have multiplayer in them, or the games that are free-to-play single-player experiences because of those same kind of reasons. But here's the main part of the thing that I don't think the person understands. Saying that the $40 price tag is, quote, a very good sign because they, quote, won't have the mobile gaming monetization, and that you will get a more complete experience with less grindy results. In every single game, at least in terms of the multiplayer, there has been a number of infested mobile gaming monetizations. The thing that he says here is that it would just be a battle pass. That's nickel and diming you to get you to pay more money, by the by. Oh, but it's optional and you don't have to get into it. Correct, but you're not getting the full experience that you actually ended up paying for in the game. Seems quite interesting. Now, again, while yes, the mobile gaming monetization is available in a lot of free-to-play games, and it is kind of predatory depending on the actual game itself, depending on where you buy it, depending on who you get it for, it's also available in full-priced games in a lot of contexts. Call of Duty, anyone? I rest my case. Not only has Call of Duty had some of the probably most predatory practices, I distinctly remember not only modern COD, but back during, say, even Call of Duty Ghosts, they were having you pay for like skin packs, and they were having you pay for even announcer voices, things that were announced in the game to get you to pay money for it. I distinctly remember I had the Snoop Dogg pack. So, yeah. But again, I don't think that it's a very good sign that it's that. And also, again, people aren't really talking about the monetization. They're talking about how the game's quality doesn't reflect the price tag of which you seems to have, which is a very fair comparison, at least in my opinion. But let's continue on here. Paid multiplayer games can be a breath of fresh air compared to the free-to-play model that dominates the mainstream. When the game charges an upfront price, it doesn't need to rely on predatory monetization tactics to sustain itself during the first cycle of its launch. This means the players can enjoy the games as it was intended, complete with a well-rounded, without feeling pressured to spend extra just to keep up. In a paid model, the focus tends to be on creating quality gameplay and fostering a dedicated community rather than designing systems to maximize revenue through in-game purchases and appealing to whales. I feel like that's become the opposite in the process here. While, yeah, it is true that paid multiplayer games can breathe some breath of fresh air in that context, again, a lot of free-to-play games have already done that. Example, Unturned, a while back, it might look like it was made in Roblox, which it kind of was. It was made by, like, a single dude and basically replicated everything DayZ was in a free-to-play game. Fragpunk replicates Valorant, which was a free-to-play version of CSGO, which also went free-to-play. So you have many different versions there. And I actually like Fragpunk a little bit more than that. There was The Finals, which takes a bunch of different things from a bunch of different eras of video games, slaps a lot of them together, and it makes a very good game that you can basically level entire buildings with, by the way. Fortnite introduced Fortnite introduced the main battle royale, but kind of popularized it in a lot of ways, and it added its own spin on the genre, allowing you to build up, structures and stuff. So that may or may not be good. Then PUBG, when it went free to play, it kind of improved in some way, shape, or form, at least not to whatever it was. But overall, the thing is that I'm trying to get at here is that the free-to-play games oftentimes can do a lot of things that regular games just don't. How many of the actual paid-for games played the fucking same? How many of the paid-for games actually are just trying to, say, ape Call of Duty? How many of the paid-for games are trying to ape Battlefield? That's the whole big thing there. There are very few games that are paid that I would say distinguish themselves for. I'd say a couple of the ones here would be like Squad, which is more of an offshoot of Project Reality because Project Reality was originally free. But Squad did some pretty good stuff. That's a pretty solid game for the price that you get, but it's a tactical shooter. Escape from Tarkov still has persisted because, it's Escape from Tarkov, and it's kind of proven itself to be one of the hardest games out there, which is kind of what Marathon's trying to go for, but at the same time, it's one of those things where you're not entirely wrong, but it feels like paid multiplayer games are also now trying to appeal to whales because of the amount of predatory microtransactions that are now available in those contexts. Additionally, paid games don't need to chase the massive player counts of games like Fortnite. These games can thrive in their niche, creating a smaller but loyal audience. By doing so, developers can focus on creating unique experiences instead of diluting their vision to appeal to the broadest possible free-to-play market. Not every multiplayer game needs to be a critical juggernaut. a cultural juggernaut, some of the most beloved titles of the PS3 to Xbox 360 succeeded precisely because they weren't trying to be. Games like Warhawk, Gears of War, The Last of Us Factions didn't need millions of concurrent players on all platforms possible to be a successful game or free to play. They simply needed a core audience that loved and supported them. I have a problem with this, mainly in the examples that he gave, saying Warhawk, Gears of War, and The Last of Us Factions. I'm not sure about Warhawk. Warhawk might be, I think, is a mech game that I'm just not really too keen on, or just have no idea what the fuck it is. But Gears of War and The Last of Us Factions, both of those games are extra multiplayer games that were tacked on to mainline single-player experiences. For at least Gears of War, it was a single-player and a co-op experience, so that kind of extended the life of that game itself. But notice where he's pulling this from. He's pulling this from the PS3 and Xbox 360 era. Games at the time there have a very different process and a very different notion of what the companies kind of thought about for that. The point being that while, yes, the games that are paid don't need the massive multiplayer accounts of, say, like Fortnite or Call of Duty, they still somehow need to actually try harder to appeal to a wider audience, to try to cast a wider net, because that's what they're currently fucking doing in the paid-for experiences. Certain games that like are free to play don't appeal to everyone, and that's fine. But they appeal to the audience that they have, and that's what they're focusing on. They're focusing on their niche. Games like, again, The Finals, Fragpunk, even games like Roblox, where, yeah, Roblox has like probably millions upon millions of players, and a lot of them seem to be younger audiences. And yeah, certainly, it has attracted a dedicated fan base of it, but they're dedicated to a bunch of different games, and again, it's more of a platform for games and blah, blah, blah. Not important. But what is important here is, again, the games that you listed are terrible examples, because those terrible examples of those games is essentially that they were single-player experiences with a tacked-on multiplayer game. Like, The Last of Us Factions only existed for The Last of Us 1. It did not come back for The Last of Us 2. And in their subsequent re-releases of both of the games, The Last of Us Factions has not made a single appearance after the fact. So those examples suck. If every multiplayer game today shifted to a free-to-play, we'd risk losing diversity and innovation that characterized the golden era of multiplayer titles. You know, the ones that released before the mobile game monetization came into the console multiplayer game's atmosphere. I like how he specifies his console multiplayer game atmosphere. Those games were built around delivering a great experience for the price that you paid. How can we have disdain for nickel and diming, yet refuse to accept a paid multiplayer game if we concede as a community that paid multiplayer games has no price? Then gas microtransaction, nickel and diming games will continue to release, and the juggernauts will never be dethroned, COD, Fortnite, etc. And as we as consumers are left with the shell of the hell in the past, we love to hear some of your guys' thoughts. Personally, I am very hyped for Marathon. I skipped Destiny as I didn't find Crucible balanced, but I am just glad to see the team doing PvP again. Okay, so here's the thing. If multiplayer games shifted to a free-to-play model, losing diversity wouldn't necessarily be the thing, because again, as I've listed off before, we have Fragpunk, we have Team Fortress 2, which is actually still free to play on PC. We have Roblox. We have The Finals. And yes, all of those games are kind of first-person shooter games, but all of them have different levels of different things here. Roblox is more of a platform that you can play a bunch of games on, and yeah, a lot of it is shovelware stuff, but some of the good stuff does tend to simmer to the top. You then have Fragpunk, which is aping Valorant, which was aping CSGO or CS2 as it now is. You then have the finals, which has several different things and is actually probably the most breath of fresh air game that I've actually had in the entire games industry right now. And TF2, which again needs very little introduction. All of those games are free to play. All of those games are FPSs, but all of those games have varying different degrees of things within the same shooter genre. Again, I'm mainly a shooter guy, so that's my basic knowledge of comparison here. But again, the biggest thing here is that this seems to be some sort of bass-ackwards argument, where the person doesn't seem to understand that the reason why people are saying this game looks free to play is because the quality of free to play games has risen so much, and if I can get something for free that's the same experience as if I pay for that experience, why would I pay for the experience if I can get the same thing for free, which is what a lot of people tend to talk about. It was even before this whole conversation with Marathon even started. So, yeah, obviously speaking, Marathon doesn't look good to people, and it's not looking good for the actual marketing crew of the game. It just kind of looks like, you're trying to defend the corporation of Marathon to be like, oh, well, this game is good because it's going to be paid for and it's not going to have, quote-unquote, the predatory microtransactions. How do you know? How the fuck do you know? Anyway, let's read some of these comments. Etho Maz here says, I prefer paid games that give me a good experience to what I played when a free-to-play games that put everything behind a paywall. Talking about big games, in my opinion, Overwatch model was way better than the Overwatch 2 model. Free-to-play always felt cheap and predatory to me like mobile games. And that's a good opinion to have. That's a very solid opinion, actually. While yes, I personally have aped about how the finals is probably the best game out there, it is still free to play, and you still have to accept that there is a lot of microtransactions and things within the game. Again, they have to keep the lights on. That's just how this works. And you're completely entitled to the opinion of saying, I don't want to fuck with free-to-play games because they just seem like very predatory to, the business model of gaming itself. And that's can be true if done incorrectly. I would say a fairly weirdly incorrect example that I kind of don't like is Fragpunk, where Fragpunk has like 5,000 different premium currencies, or 5,000 different currencies there. Some of them are premium, some of them are not, some of them are semi-premium, or you can earn them in-game, blah, 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 blah. But like, that sort of mobile gaming stuff I don't really like, but the finals does a pretty decent balance where they update the store every week. Obviously, they have a battle pass because, they got to keep the lights on. But again, that battle pass does give you the premium currency back that you invest into the battle pass itself, etc, etc. And overall, they have ways that you can buy skins with real money, but still get premium currency on top of that. So that basically means you're paying for the skins, yes, but you're also getting the money to put into the game to get even more skins. So it's kind of one of those things to draw people in, and yeah, it's pretty much a big marketing thing, and I'm probably not the best example in terms of at least the finals and several other games there, but I am fully aware that the free-to-play model does take advantage of people. So, yeah, it's perfectly fine to say, I don't want to fuck with that, I don't like the model, and it feels predatory. And it's kind of true. Next up here it says, as someone who played Overwatch Day 1, paid full price, and then lived through Overwatch 2, I agree 100%. I barely hype myself up for events and collabs anymore. And again, I think that comes down to the fact of Overwatch and Overwatch 2 just kind of being two different games, pretty much. It's kind of dumb. Killer Sokan with, nowadays, you pay $40 for a free-to-play experience. Actually, free-to-play nowadays is worth less than 5 years ago. That depends on the game. I would say that that you pay $40 for a free-to-play experience. Yeah, that is correct. And again, in some cases, you pay upwards of $70 to $80 now for a quote-unquote free-to-play experience. And that free-to-play experience being the predatory microtransactions that we've talked about throughout the majority of this video. And free-to-play games nowadays is worse than 5 years ago? I don't think so. I think that, again, it depends on the games that you're looking for. For some of the bigger games out there that I would, again, recommend highly for free-to-play experiences, I would say that, again, the Finals and Fragpunk kind of go to the top of the shooter genre in that context. I know that Unturned is also free-to-play. I know that Roblox is, again, the game that we all know is free-to-play. There are several other ones out there that are free-to-play that do have hours upon hours of content in them because, people actually fucking care about that shit. So, again, saying that free-to-play is worse than it was 5 years ago, I'd say that there's more shovelware there, sure, but I would also say that the stuff and quality has kind of gone up in several of those years as people actually want people to play their fucking games. Next up here, we have Goomba Galaxy with, I think it's okay to purchase a multiplayer game as long as it includes a single-player campaign. A game that is strictly multiplayer becomes difficult for me to purchase. I've always thought the same about Overwatch, which is why I've never purchased it, despite my enjoyment with the beta. And that's, again, another pretty solid opinion across the board. I don't really see anything wrong with that. Purchasing a multiplayer game to just experience the multiplayer is kind of, because, you don't get that single-player experiences, and once the servers are pulled offline, like they were with Overwatch as an example, you can't really play that game anymore. And with the free-to-play games, at least with the investment that you made within the game itself, yeah, certainly. There is definitely certain things and certain problems with investing specific games and investing this in specific stuff. And all of that is fine and dandy, but again, you're not really paying an upfront cost. But again, I agree with this. Playing strictly for a multiplayer thing is a hard sell, but for me, it wasn't actually a hard enough sell that I didn't at least purchase Titanfall 1. Titanfall 2 also was definitely worth it, and I really hope that they at least look into making a Titanfall 3. But again, with Apex Legends, that seems to be kind of the thing that's fallen to the wayside. Next up here, we have someone replying to the whole thing with the whole blah, 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 saying free-to-play is a massive red flag for me. Either the game is cheap and nasty or full of microtransactions, then there you have cheaters. I would rather have a 40-pound game than a free-to-play simply to avoid them. Having a 40-pound game isn't a cheater deterrent, especially if the game's popular enough. Hell, there are people out there that have, say, I think for Warzone and for like the multiplayer for Call of Duty, all of those people do have problems with cheaters and have had problems with cheaters for it. It doesn't just exist solely at the higher end paid for level, and it even exists in places that you wouldn't expect it, like Escape from Tarkov, where Tarkov itself is a PvE sort of extraction shooter and already still has a problem with cheaters and has had problems with cheaters throughout the entirety of its life. Yeah, they are a smaller dev team, but even if Call of fucking Duty can't fucking help and combat shit like cheaters effectively, what makes you think that they're going to do the same thing here? Again, cheating is a problem all around, and I'm not denying that. It's just that saying that, oh yeah, I would rather pay for an experience to try to avoid the things. There are certainly less cheaters in a paid-for game, certainly, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. Next up here, we have Ethomaz again saying, which free-to-play game has... someone here basically says that $20 to $80 loot boxes are a problem. Normal people with impulse control don't buy that shit. Now, no one has a gun and is forcing you to pay for the loot boxes, and that's pretty true. Again, it's all optional if you really kind of think about it. Saying which free-to-play game has more locked pay by paywall day one than paid games. I mean, it depends on the game. Call of Duty now has more locked content in a paid-for experience than anything else. And which one has more locked content than a $70 paid game? I mean, yeah, I guess, but a lot of the content that's usually locked behind those paywalls is usually cosmetic, as we've come to accept that. You have less content and pay more to continue to have less content than a paid game. Depends on the game. But eventually, after you spend 100, 200, 300, 400,000, etc., you may be able to have more content than a game that you paid $70 with the money you bought with $70 games. Free-to-play is predatory and anti-consumer business. Again, I think that there is definitely a fine line when it comes to free-to-play monetization. While, yes, there is definitely people out there that will never, ever, 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 ever get a free-to-play game for that, and how, yes, it is kind of predatory and anti-consumer, but I would say that it's very case by case and game by game specifically dependent, even case by case in some cases for like the same game. I know for an example in the finals, there was a pretty big controversy when the multiplayer for the Halloween event came around one year, where they actually had a premium skin that had come in the battle pass where other people could just now pay for it. And they have kind of walked around this a little bit, and they've kind of learned those lessons, and they do still have times where they have stuff that enters and leaves the store for reasons of X, Y, and Z. And overall, that is fine, and you can still get those things, but having those stuff come back is kind of the norm nowadays, especially when it comes to things like Fortnite, where a lot of the skins that were in battle passes came back after a time here. I did have like 3 more comments that I was going to be talking about in this, but after reading through them, I think that we've kind of answered a lot of the questions here. Plus, I'm getting into the big, long, ranty bit of this, and I just don't think that it's kind of worth it to talk about this anymore. Overall, are free-to-play games predatory? Can they have predatory microtransactions? Yes, absolutely. I'm not denying that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't. If you don't want to engage with those systems, don't. It's very easy to say, just don't. But to the people that do say that that the free-to-play experience has diluted the person's intention for paying for stuff, if the person is still willing to put money into a game, that means that they would have most likely paid for it. I think that it's actually interesting that they're saying free-to-play games have lowered the expectations of gamers in terms of price value. No, I would say that it actually makes them higher, because if, again, you have a free-to-play experience that does everything that the paid-for experience does, but also extra stuff and has extra things and a community behind it, yeah. As an example, fuck Adobe. Adobe themselves is a paid-for experience that I used to use a lot more for a lot of my content creation needs. However, once I got out of college, I said, fuck that, and dropped everything Adobe immediately. I now use things such as Krita for my thumbnail art and my thumbnail designs, as well as DaVinci Resolve, which is everything that Photoshop and, not really Photoshop, but is everything that both After Effects and Premiere Pro are, but, better, as it has more open-ended experiences and has a lot of free plugins that I can just put into the actual thing to allow me to, make content faster. Like, why would I pay Adobe for an inferior experience when DaVinci Resolve does everything that I want for free? Same thing between Blender and Maya kind of is happening in the more smaller spaces. It really depends on where you are. Overall, and the biggest and most important thing here is that just because something is free doesn't necessarily mean that it's the worst experience of the two. It just means that the paid-for experience would have to then work harder to be better than the free experience in that context. And Marathon doesn't seem to do that. But that's just my personal opinion. And overall, that's really all I have to say on this matter. If you like what it is that I do and want to support me in any other way, shape, or form other than like and subscribe, which is always enough, links down to everything in the description below. My new music coming out this Saturday. Look out for that, speed paint and other sorts of stuff. If you like what it is that I do again, my name is GamePenguin21, and a peace off.